Okay, let's dive into this, because today we are looking at a truly fascinating piece of source material. We're exploring an 11th century revolution led by a philosopher named Ramanuja. Our source frames this historical deep dive through a narrative dialogue between two figures, Zoran and Fletcher, who really guide us through one of the most profound shifts in social and spiritual history. We're going to see exactly how one man's vision of inclusion wasn't just, a nice idea, it was a literal revolution.
And the material hooks us immediately with this unbelievably powerful statement from Zoran. Philosophy rarely threatens kings, but compassion does. I mean, think about that for a second. Abstract ideas and philosophical debates, they're safe, right? They just sit quietly on dusty shelves. But actual, actionable compassion, that fundamentally threatens the structures of power. And this totally sets the stage for everything we are about to unpack.
So, to understand why this compassion was so dangerous, we have to look at the rigid social architecture of Srirangam at the time. Society was strictly, brutally divided. On one side, you've got the temple inside, where access to the divine was granted solely based on privileged birth. And then, on the other side, the courtyard outside. Out here stood people who were barred forever, simply because they lacked the right birth. The stakes here were incredibly high. Exclusion wasn't just a social rule, it was literally considered sacred.
Which brings us to the central mystery of our explainer today. If an entire society firmly believes that birth determines your worth, and that the divine is locked behind actually physical and social gates, how did one man break that sacred system of exclusion? I mean, how do you even begin to overthrow a structure that is so deeply ingrained in the culture?
Section 1. The Architecture of Exclusion. I want you to imagine standing with devotees outside that inner sanctum. Their eyes are just filled with longing, totally resigned to being kept out simply by the circumstances of their birth. But while others accepted this as normal, Ramanuja looked at this excluded crowd and experienced a profound shift. Our source notes that Ramanuja felt something the prevailing philosophy of the time, Advaita, couldn't adequately explain. He realized simply, the pain of another being is real. This wasn't some abstract observation for him. He felt their exclusion deeply. And that realization, it demanded action.
Which leads us to Section 2, 4 Acts of Defiance.
Because Ramanuja didn't just ask for polite change. He forced a totally new reality through 4 escalating steps: translating the divine, opening the physical temple, embracing the marginalized, and offering refuge. Let's move through these and see how this builds, because each step shattered a completely different pillar of exclusion.
Act 1 starts with language. He took sacred mantras, which were previously locked up in Sanskrit and completely controlled by elites, and he translated them into everyday Tamil. By doing this, he democratized access, empowered the marginalized, elevated Tamil to a sacred status, broke a massive knowledge monopoly, and basically made devotion a universal right. As Zoran brilliantly puts it in the text, it was linguistic engineering as social revolution. It wasn't just translation, you guys, it was liberation.
Then came Act 2, and this is a truly monumental moment. Ramanuja walked right up to the physical temple gates, looked at the invisible, forgotten crowds, and delivered this undeniable logic. If God is the soul of all beings, then who are we to deny entry to his own body? And then he physically opened the gates. Not metaphorically, not in some philosophical text, he physically pushed open those heavy wooden doors to people who had been barred forever.
Now, the reaction was exactly what you'd expect when a massive system of power is threatened. This was absolutely not a symbolic gesture. It was a direct assault on the social architecture of the time. The priests were horrified. The elites were enraged. The people themselves were absolutely stunned. But the most important detail here? The gates stayed open.
And Act 3 shows us he didn't just stop at the gates. He completely shattered everyday social rules. He initiated disciples from all castes, elevated marginalized individuals to leadership roles, and even ate food prepared by those society deemed untouchable. He built entirely new systems where everyone had a place. Through his everyday actions, he basically declared that devotion, not your birth, determines your spiritual worth.
This all culminates in Act 4, which is captured in this beautifully intimate anecdote in our source. One night, a trembling, terrified man from a marginalized community approached Ramanuja, feeling just entirely unworthy. Ramanuja simply placed his hand on the man's head and told him, "You are not outside, you are the heart of the divine." This is pure recognition, and the source points out that this specific moment changed India, not through some grand political maneuvering, but through the profound, simple power of recognizing another human being's inherent worth.
Moving into Section 3, the metaphysics of inclusion.
To really understand his actions, we have to look at the philosophy driving them. Now, what's really interesting about this part of the text is how Ramanuja viewed equality. For him, equality wasn't just moral, it was ontological. It was about the very essence of being. He wasn't just trying to be a progressive social reformer, He was trying to be completely accurate to how the universe actually operates.
Which brings us to this incredibly profound thesis from the text. If the universe is the body of God, then exclusion is a form of cosmic self-harm. I mean, really think about the logic there. If every single being is a cell within a massive divine organism, then hurting or excluding any part of that body actually damages the whole. Systemic exclusion isn't just mean. Under this philosophy, it's entirely illogical. It is literally the universe hurting itself.
There's a massive difference between moral equality, which is basically just acting progressive and being kind, and ontological equality. Ontological equality means aligning your actions with the literal fundamental structure of reality. We are all made of the exact same cosmic fabric, so therefore inclusion is the only logical way to exist.
This takes us to Section 4, Science Confirms Optimal Design.
Now, you might be wondering how 11th century mysticism holds up today. Well, just look at the empirical data. In evolutionary biology, cooperation increases survival. In neuroscience, compassion literally stabilizes the human nervous system. Sociology proves inclusive systems are more resilient. Ecology shows us that diversity strengthens ecosystems. And in network theory, highly interconnected nodes create much stronger networks. And this brilliantly illustrates how modern multidisciplinary science empirically proves exactly what Ramanuja intuited 1,000 years ago.
So the crucial takeaway here is that inclusion is not morality. It is optimal design. It's about doing the thing that makes systems survive, thrive, and remain resilient. Ramanuja's metaphysical claims aren't just poetic. They are deeply grounded in hard, systemic logic and observable reality.
And finally, Section 5, Expanding the Universe.
As we bring this all together, it's clear Ramanuja's voice of inclusion was never just sentimental. It was a true cosmic realization. He saw the divine in every being. He understood compassion as absolute metaphysical truth. He saw the world as God's body, recognized the soul as a mode of the infinite, and saw equality as the foundational structure of reality itself. These are the massive, cosmic realizations that drove him to act.
Now, of course, there was extreme backlash. Kings and priests pressured him, they plotted against him, and they tried desperately to silence him. Our source points out a vital neutral truth here. Inclusion naturally threatens those who profit from an exclusive system. But Ramanuja understood he was fighting a system, not individuals. So he didn't compromise, he didn't apologize, and he definitely didn't retreat. He simply kept opening gates.
Zoran leaves us with this incredibly resonant closing thought. He did not expand society. He expanded the universe. Ramanuja didn't just tweak the social rules of 11th century India to make things slightly fairer. No, he completely reframed the cosmos to show that every single person has an undeniable, structurally vital place within it. And that is exactly why his legacy is eternal.
So, we're going to end on this thought-provoking question, directly inspired by our source material. If exclusion is truly a form of cosmic self-harm and inclusion is optimal design, what locked gates in your own systems, your workplaces, or communities do you need to physically or metaphorically open today? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable history with me. Keep learning and keep opening those gates.